Scenes. The Special Forces captain laughed when she said she could shoot. 4 hours later, he watched her save his entire team from 900 meters away. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had heard every variation of the joke during her 8 months embedded with ODA 332. The Green Berets called her Doc, but the nickname carried an edge of condescension. She was their combat medic, valuable for treating casualties, but not considered a tactical asset. Her sniper qualification from her previous assignment with the 75th Ranger Regiment never came up in conversation because nobody asked. They saw the medical cross on her uniform and assumed that defined her entire capability. The team was operating in the mountains of northern Iraq, tracking an ISIS commander who'd been coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. Captain Richards had 12 men moving through a valley toward the target compound when the world exploded into chaos. The ambush was perfectly executed. 42 enemy fighters in prepared positions on both ridges, PKM machine guns zeroed on the kill zone, and an 82mm mortar crew dropping rounds with practiced precision. Richards' team took 3 casualties in the first 90 seconds. Elena was positioned 900 meters away on overwatch with their designated sniper, Sergeant Mills, who'd made it clear from day one that he didn't need a medic babysitting his hide site. Then the first mortar round landed close enough to shower them with rocks, and Mills took shrapnel across his back and neck. He was conscious but bleeding heavily, combat ineffective, his custom M2010 rifle lying between them untouched. She had maybe 60 seconds before the team below was completely overrun. Elena made the calculation instantly. Mills needed treatment but would survive another 10 minutes. The team in the valley wouldn't survive 10 minutes without precision fire support, eliminating those machine gun positions and the mortar crew. She reached for Mills's rifle, a weapon system she'd trained on extensively but never mentioned to the team, and began the work of proving that sometimes the medic is the most dangerous person on the battlefield. The first shot took the mortar gunner at 920 meters. The M2010's recoil pushed against her shoulder with familiar authority. Elena worked the bolt, chambering another 300 Winchester Magnum round as she tracked to the next target. The mortar crew's loader was scrambling to take over his dead gunner's position. She let out half a breath and pressed the trigger. The loader collapsed across the mortar tube. Below in the valley, Captain Richards was screaming into his radio for air support that was still 18 minutes out. 18 minutes might as well be 18 hours in a firefight like this. Mills was conscious enough to watch her work, his eyes widening despite the pain as Elena transitioned between targets with mechanical efficiency. She wasn't just shooting, she was conducting a surgical dismantling of the enemy's tactical advantage. The PKM gunner on the eastern ridge had Richards' element pinned behind inadequate cover. Elena calculated the holdover for the uphill shot at 875 meters, adjusted 2 clicks for the crosswind, and sent a round through the gunner's chest. His assistant tried to swing the weapon toward her position. He never completed the movement. The radio traffic from the valley was pure chaos. Someone was screaming about a man down. Another voice was calling out grid coordinates for the mortar impacts. Richards was trying to organize a fighting withdrawal, but every time his men moved, the machine guns opened up again. Elena found the second PKM position on the western ridge. This shooter was smart, moving after every burst to avoid counterfire. She waited, watching his pattern, predicting where he'd appear next. When his head came up above the rocks, she was already squeezed halfway through the trigger press. 5 shots, 5 targets eliminated. The enemy fire was becoming disorganized, panicked. They'd been executing a textbook ambush against what they thought was an isolated American unit with no support. Now their crew-served weapons were going silent one by one, their operators dead from a shooter they couldn't locate. Elena could see confusion spreading through their positions as men broke cover to look around, trying to find the sniper. Each moment of exposure was another opportunity. She took full advantage, methodically working through the priority targets that threatened the team below. Behind her, Mills had managed to key his radio despite his wounds. His voice was hoarse but clear. "Viper 6! This is Eagle 2! Doc has the rifle! Say again, Doc has taken over precision fire. Jesus Christ, she's killing them all?" There was a moment of stunned silence on the net before Richards responded, his tone incredulous, even as he fought for his life. Elena didn't have attention to spare for their surprise. She'd found what looked like a commander position on the northern ridge, 3 men clustered around communications equipment. The commander was gesturing frantically, trying to reorganize his scattered fighters. Elena put the crosshairs on his center mass and fired. He dropped immediately. The radio man beside him grabbed for the equipment, probably trying to call for reinforcements. Elena's next round destroyed both the radio and the man operating it. The third fighter in the group made the fatal mistake of standing fully upright in shock. She put him down before he could process what was happening. The enemy force had lost its command element in under 8 seconds. In the valley, Richards finally had breathing room to move his casualties. 2 of his men were dragging a wounded teammate toward better cover, while another provided suppressing fire. Elena covered their movement, scanning for threats. A fighter popped up from behind a boulder with an RPG, the launcher already on his shoulder, aimed at the exposed Americans. She rushed the shot slightly, hitting him in the shoulder instead of center mass. But the impact spun him around, and the rocket-propelled grenade launched wild, detonating harmlessly against the cliff face 50 meters away. Mills was maintaining a running count between labored breaths. "That's 14 confirmed kills in 6 minutes, Doc. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" Elena didn't answer, already tracking to the next target. A group of 5 fighters was attempting to flank Richards's position from the south, using a dry creek bed for concealment. They thought they were invisible, but from her elevated angle she could see them clearly moving through the ravine. She began with the lead man and worked backward, so the others wouldn't immediately realize they were being engaged. The first fighter in the creek bed crumpled without a sound at 940 meters. The second fell 3 seconds later. By the third shot, the remaining 2 men understood they were in a fatal funnel and tried to run. One made it 4 steps before Elena's bullet caught him between the shoulder blades. The last man attempted to climb out of the ravine, clawing at the steep bank in panic. It was an impossible shot with a moving target at extreme angle, but Elena had trained for impossible shots. The M2010 barked once more, and the ravine was silent. The battle was turning into a rout. The surviving enemy fighters were breaking contact, abandoning their positions and fleeing north into the mountains. A few tried to return fire in Elena's general direction, but they were shooting blind, their rounds impacting uselessly into the hillside 200 meters short of her position. She picked off 3 more as they ran, then shifted focus to ensuring no one was setting up for a final ambush of the withdrawing American team. Captain Richards' voice came over the radio, steadier now, but laced with something that might have been awe. "Eagle 2, Viper 6. Status on you and Doc?" Richards' question came through clearly, now that the gunfire had diminished. Mills keyed his radio again, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. "I'm hit but stable. Doc stopped the bleeding before she started returning fire. Sir, I need to tell you something about your medic. She's not just quailed on the M2010. She's got a sniper tab, and her shooting scores at selection were higher than mine. I just looked at her personnel file on the tablet." The silence that followed was loaded with implications. Elena maintained her focus on the valley, watching for any remaining threats as the team consolidated. She'd expended 23 rounds and counted 21 confirmed kills, with at least 3 more probable. The math was efficient, professional, exactly what her instructors at Fort Benning had trained her to deliver. But she could already feel the shift happening, the one she'd experienced before when people discovered she existed outside their assumptions. In her peripheral vision, Mills was staring at her with an expression somewhere between respect and embarrassment. The team fought their way to her position 30 minutes later, carrying their wounded. Captain Richards climbed the last 50 meters personally, his face streaked with dust and dried blood from a fragment cut across his cheek. He stopped 3 paces from where Elena was finally treating Mills' wounds properly, the rifle cleaned, and returned to its case. Richards opened his mouth twice before actual words came out. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, it seems we've been operating under some significant misconceptions about your capabilities. Why didn't you say anything when Mills was bragging about his quals?" Elena pressed gauze against Mills's neck wound, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "You didn't ask, sir. I'm a medic first. That's why the Army assigned me to ODA 3302. The sniper qualification is secondary to my primary military occupational specialty. I mentioned it during in-brief 8 months ago, but the conversation moved to medical protocols." She met Richard's eyes without challenge or accusation, just stating facts. Mills made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. "She mentioned it. Jesus, I remember now. I thought she meant she took a weekend familiarization course." Richards ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration directed entirely at himself. Around them, his team was setting security and treating casualties, but every man kept glancing toward Elena with newfound awareness. The captain knelt down to her level, his voice lower. "Ranger Regiment, according to your file. You were attached to a sniper section for 14 months in Afghanistan, 47 confirmed kills before you reclassed to medical. The file says you left the sniper program voluntarily. Why would someone with your talent switch to being a medic?" The question carried genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Elena finished bandaging Mills before answering, her movements practiced and efficient. "Because I was good at killing people, sir, but I wanted to be good at saving them. I'd taken 3 friends off mountains in body bags and decided I'd rather learn to prevent that. Turned out I had aptitude for both skill sets. The Army let me keep my sniper certification active when I went through Special Operations Combat Medic training. Seemed wasteful not to maintain the quals." Her tone was matter-of-fact, discussing career decisions the way someone might explain choosing a college major. The team established a perimeter while waiting for extraction. Apache gunships arrived first, circling overhead like protective angels, but the enemy had scattered completely. Elena moved between the 3 wounded operators, checking vitals and adjusting pressure dressings. The men watched her with new eyes, seeing both sides of her capabilities simultaneously. Sergeant Chen, who'd been hit in the leg during the initial ambush, spoke quietly as she changed his bandage. "Doc, I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been treating you like you're just here to carry our medical gear." Elena didn't look up from her work on Chen's wound. "You've been treating me exactly how the Army trained you to treat a combat medic attached to your unit. The bias isn't personal, Sergeant. It's institutional. People see the medical cross and they categorize. I've had 3 years to get used to it." Chen shook his head, wincing as she probed near the fragment wound. "That's not an excuse. Mills has been talking shit about carrying you through training exercises. Meanwhile, you've been hauling 60 pounds of medical supplies and apparently could outshoot him the entire time. That's on us, not the institution." Richards assembled the team before the helicopters arrived, everyone in a defensive circle except the casualties, and Elena still working on them. His voice carried the weight of command and something else, the humility of a leader recognizing failure. "Gentlemen, today we learned an expensive lesson about assumptions. We had an asset on our team that we completely failed to utilize because we didn't bother to look past her primary specialty. Staff Sergeant Vasquez saved every life in this unit today, and she did it after we spent 8 months treating her like a liability in combat situations." The captain continued, making eye contact with each man. "She's got more confirmed kills than anyone in this ODA now, and she earned them while keeping Mills alive and maintaining Overwatch discipline. That's multitasking at a level none of us can match. From this moment forward, Vasquez is a full tactical element in our planning. Her medical expertise remains primary, but her sniper qualification is now part of our operational capability matrix. Anyone have a problem with that?" The silence was absolute, except for the distant thump of approaching Black Hawks. Mills raised his bandaged hand slightly. "No problem here, sir. I'd be honored to train with her." The flight back to base was quiet, each man processing the day's events in his own way. Elena sat between the litters carrying the wounded, monitoring their conditions while the Black Hawk's rotors hammered overhead. She caught fragments of conversation through the headsets. The pilots had already heard about the ambush through command channels, and the story was evolving with each retelling. Single sniper eliminated over 20 hostiles. Medic took out the entire enemy force. The legend was forming before they'd even landed, and Elena felt the familiar discomfort of unwanted attention settling over her shoulders. Debriefing lasted 4 hours. Intelligence officers wanted every detail about enemy positions, weapon systems, and the commander she'd killed. The man had apparently been a high-value target, someone 3 different agencies had been tracking for 7 months. His death would disrupt operations across the entire province. A colonel from Joint Special Operations Command sat in on the final hour, asking pointed questions about Elena's training background and current assignment. She answered precisely, watching his expression shift from skepticism to calculation. He was already thinking about how to use her, how to weaponize her dual skill sets. Richards found her in the medical facility after midnight, checking on Mills and the other wounded operators one final time before heading to her quarters. The captain looked exhausted, still wearing his combat uniform with the day's dust ground into the fabric. "They're going to want to transfer you," he said without preamble. "JSOC is already making noise about reassigning you to a specialized unit. Apparently a combat medic who can shoot like a Tier 1 sniper is exactly the kind of asset they've been trying to develop. They'll call it an opportunity for career advancement and increased operational impact." Elena had expected this. It was the same conversation she'd had 3 years ago when she left Ranger Regiment, the same pressure to be defined by her capacity for violence rather than her ability to heal. She checked Mills's IV line before responding. "What do you think I should do, sir?" Richards leaned against the doorframe, considering his words carefully. "I think you should do whatever serves your goals, not theirs. You're the most valuable operator I've ever worked with precisely because you refuse to be just one thing. They'll want to make you into a pure weapon. You've clearly chosen to be something more complex than that." The conversation was interrupted by Mills, who'd been pretending to sleep but had obviously been listening. "Don't transfer, Doc. We need you here. Not just your shooting. We actually need someone who gives a damn about keeping us alive more than racking up kills. Today proved you can do both. But I've seen pure shooters. They're dangerous in a different way to everyone around them." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "You stopped the bleeding before you picked up my rifle. That matters. That's who you are. Don't let them take that away because you're also good at the other thing." Elena sat down in the chair beside Mills's bed, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. 21 confirmed kills and 3 lives saved, all before lunch. Her hands were steady, but she could feel the tremor waiting underneath, the physiological response she'd learned to delay until the mission was complete. "I left Ranger Regiment because I was becoming numb to it," she said quietly. "Every target was just a problem to solve, a calculation of wind and distance and bullet drop. I stopped seeing them as people. The medical training brought me back. It reminded me what we're actually fighting for." Richards moved further into the room, pulling up another chair. "The colonel who sat in on debriefing is going to push hard for your transfer. He's already talking about building a special operations medical sniper program with you as the proof of concept. They'd want you to train others, create an entire specialty around what you can do. It would mean promotion, probably substantial recognition. They might even offer you a commission." Elena met his eyes directly. "And what would you lose if I left, sir? Be honest." The captain's expression was answer enough before he spoke. "We'd lose our medic and our conscience," Richards admitted. "The team has started taking more risks over the past 8 months. Stupid, aggressive risks. I think it's because you're always there to patch us up when things go wrong. We've started thinking of ourselves as invincible because you keep bringing us home alive. But today, watching you on that ridge, we saw something different. You used violence as a last resort to protect life, not as a first option. That's the standard we should be holding ourselves to. If you leave, I'm worried we'll forget that again." Mills shifted in his bed, grimacing at the pain the movement caused. "Plus, Doc, you're actually good at the teaching part. You've been running medical cross-training every week, making sure we can all do basic trauma care. You made it make sense instead of just being checklist bullshit. And you never made us feel stupid for asking questions even when Chen asked how to put on a tourniquet for the 3rd time." Chen's voice came from across the room where he was lying in his own bed. "I remember things better when I hear them multiple times. Doc gets that." The weight of their words settled over Elena like a familiar burden. She'd joined Special Forces to be part of a team, to use both her skill sets in service of something larger than herself. The JSOC opportunity would turn her into a symbol, a recruiting poster, a proof of concept for a program that would inevitably prioritize the killing over the healing. "I'll tell them I'm staying with ODA 3312, she said finally. "My career will probably plateau because of it. I won't get the promotion or the recognition. But I didn't learn to save lives just to abandon the team that needs me most." The meeting with the JSOC colonel happened 3 days later in a sterile conference room that smelled of coffee and ambition. He arrived with a personnel officer and a presentation folder thick with plans for the medical sniper program. Elena listened politely for 40 minutes while he outlined opportunities, spoke about revolutionizing special operations capability, and mentioned her name in the same breath as legendary operators she'd only read about. When he finally paused, she simply said, "Thank you, sir, but I'm respectfully declining the transfer. My place is with my team." The colonel's face went through several expressions before settling on controlled frustration. "Staff Sergeant, you understand what you're turning down. This isn't just a transfer, it's a chance to shape the entire future of special operations medicine. You'd be writing doctrine, training the next generation, building something that outlasts any single deployment. Instead, you want to stay attached to one ODA in a regional combat outpost?" Elena kept her posture relaxed, but her voice firm. "Sir, with respect, doctrine doesn't save lives in the moment. Being present with my team does. I can do more good right where I am." The personnel officer tried a different approach, sliding papers across the table. "You're aware that remaining in your current position likely caps your advancement. We're offering promotion to Sergeant First Class immediately with a clear pathway to commissioned officer rank. That's significant upward mobility for someone with your time in service." Elena glanced at the papers without touching them. "I'm aware of the career implications, ma'am, but I've seen what happens when people chase rank instead of mission. I didn't join Special Forces to climb a ladder. I joined to be effective where it matters most." The colonel leaned back, reassessing her with narrowed eyes. "You realize this decision will follow you. Other commands will hear that you refused a high-profile assignment. Some will respect it. Others will see it as lack of ambition or team player mentality. You might find doors closed that could have been open." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Then I'll know which doors were worth walking through, sir." The men I serve with almost died 3 days ago. I was there to prevent that, both with my medical skills and my marksmanship. That's where I belong, with operators who need both, not in a schoolhouse building a program. The meeting ended with stiff handshakes and disappointed faces. Richards was waiting outside, leaning against the hallway wall with his arms crossed. He didn't ask what happened. Elena's expression told him everything. "They took it badly," he observed. Elena shrugged, feeling lighter than she had in days. "They'll recover. Probably find someone else to build their program, someone who wants that kind of attention. Meanwhile, we've got training exercises scheduled for next week, and I need to restock my medical supplies. Mills used up half my hemostatic gauze, bleeding all over the mountain." Richard smiled, genuinely for the first time since the ambush. The team dynamics shifted subtly over the following weeks, not dramatically but in small, meaningful ways that Elena noticed during daily operations. Mills started asking her opinion during tactical planning sessions. Chen requested additional medical training specifically from her, wanting to understand trauma care at a deeper level. Even the newer members who'd barely spoken to her before began treating her as a full operator rather than just attached support personnel. The respect wasn't loud or performative. It was quiet, professional, and exactly what she'd been seeking for 8 months without realizing it. 6 weeks after the ambush, ODA 3312 received a commendation for their actions during the mission. The ceremony was small, held in the operations center with minimal fanfare. The commanding general pinned bronze stars on Richards and 3 other team members for valor under fire. When he reached Elena, he paused, holding a different medal, the Silver Star. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, your actions that day exemplified the highest traditions of military service. 21 enemy combatants eliminated while simultaneously providing life-saving medical care under fire. Your choice to remain with your team, despite other opportunities, shows the kind of character we need in special operations." Elena stood at attention as the general pinned the medal to her uniform, acutely aware of every eye in the room focused on her. She'd never wanted recognition, had actively avoided it throughout her career, but she understood the weight of this moment, not for herself, but for every female operator who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed because of assumptions about capability. When the general stepped back and saluted, she returned it crisply. Mills started the applause, and the rest of the team joined immediately. The sound echoed off the concrete walls like thunder, acknowledging not just her actions but her decision to stay. After the ceremony, the team gathered in their team room, the casual space where they spent most of their downtime between missions. Someone had bought a cake from the base exchange, and Chen was attempting to cut it into equal portions with a knife he'd obviously sharpened too enthusiastically. Richards raised a plastic cup of near beer in Elena's direction. "To Doc Vasquez, who saves our asses, shoots better than Mills, and had the good sense to stick around despite better offers. We don't deserve her, but we're damn grateful she's here." The team echoed the sentiment with raised cups and genuine smiles. Elena accepted the toast with a nod, feeling something unfamiliar settling in her chest, belonging without reservation, respect without qualification. Mills approached with a piece of cake on a paper plate, his neck wound now just a healing scar. "Doc, I've been thinking about what you said, about why you switched from sniper to medic. I want to learn more about the medical side, not to change careers, but to understand what you see when you're working on us. Maybe it'll make me better at my job too." Elena took the cake, recognizing the offer for what it was, not just a request for training, but an acknowledgement of her full humanity, her complete skill set, her choice to be both warrior and healer. 3 months later, Elena found herself back on a ridge, but this time the circumstances were entirely different. ODA 3312 was running a joint training exercise with a newly formed team, and she'd been asked to demonstrate integrated sniper medic tactics. The new team's medic, a young sergeant named Torres, watched with intense focus as Eleanor explained her approach. "The key is knowing which skill set the situation demands and being able to transition instantly. You don't abandon your medical priorities, you expand your tactical value while maintaining your primary mission of keeping your team alive." Torres asked the question Elena had been expecting. "But doesn't carrying sniper equipment compromise your medical load? How do you decide what to bring?" Elena opened her pack, showing the careful organization that had taken years to perfect. "You don't compromise, you optimize. Every piece of gear serves multiple purposes when possible. My rifle weighs 7 pounds and can save the entire team. My medical supplies weigh 53 pounds and serve the same purpose through different means. I carry both because both are necessary. The real question isn't what to bring, it's whether you're willing to do the conditioning required to carry it all effectively." Richards pulled Elena aside after the training session, his expression serious but not troubled. Command finally processed the after-action reports from the ambush. Turns out the enemy commander you killed was responsible for 17 attacks on coalition forces over 2 years. Intelligence estimates your actions that day saved somewhere between 40 and 60 lives, both military and civilian, by removing him from the battlefield. They're putting you in for another commendation. Elena looked out across the training range where her team was packing equipment. I was just doing my job, sir, both parts of it. That evening, the team gathered for what had become a weekly tradition, medical cross-training, followed by informal conversation. Mills had progressed significantly, now able to handle complex trauma scenarios with confidence. Chen had discovered an aptitude for teaching others, often explaining concepts to newer members in ways they could grasp immediately. As Elena watched them work through a simulated casualty scenario, Richard spoke quietly beside her. You changed this team, Doc. Not just by staying, but by showing us that false choices, warrior or healer, killer or caregiver, are traps we set for ourselves. You refused the trap and made us all better operators because of it. Elena sat on the steps outside the team room that night, her silver star in its case beside her, watching the sun set over the Afghan mountains. The medal represented vindication, proof that her choices had been right even when they'd been difficult, but the real validation came from the voices inside. Mills teaching trauma care to Torres, Chen explaining tactical medicine with enthusiasm, Richards planning next month's operations with her input woven throughout. She'd turned down glory for purpose, rank for presence, recognition for belonging. Some would call it sacrifice. Elena knew better. She'd chosen to be complete rather than singular, complex rather than simple. In doing so, she'd found exactly where she was meant to be.